Only Russia is currently the sole owner of a hypersonic weapon in service. Other countries still have it in the experimental stage. It's as if it's hinting to many that Russia should not be threatened with strategic defeat. Let's go in from afar to remind you of something. On July 16, 1945, in complete secrecy in the desert area of New Mexico, in the town of Alamogordo, USA, the first atomic weapon test in history was made. The video footage captured on tape during the tests traveled around the world and reached everyone to whom it was addressed. They were seen in the Soviet Union 4 days later. The effect turned out to be unpleasant for us. Our enemy, then still among our allies, had in his hands a weapon that could affect the fate of the world. Americans took advantage of this and gained a number of geopolitical advantages, occupying, for example, the island of Hokkaido, where the Soviet landing force was to land. And only in August 1949 our country was able to breathe freely when our own bomb was tested near Semipalatinsk. This is a very good illustration of how the geopolitical situation in the world changes depending on the presence in the arsenal of a state claiming world domination of such weapons that cannot be parried. Although in theory the bomb's nuke carrier could be shot down. But there's no way to shoot down our current Russian super missile. It's just not possible. There aren't even any radars in the Western armies that could detect it. Here is the launch of a hypersonic missile from the frigate Admiral Gorshkov. Beautifully done, as always a good shot. The leadership of our country does not pretend to world domination, and you and I, laying our hands on our hearts, do not need it. But Russia now has an instrument against which all the loud and pathos-laden chatter of Western bureaucrats is set. For some reason to start a war with us, which they cannot win, sounds rather primitive babble and gratuitous puffing of cheeks. And this tool, hypersonic missile Zircons, the presence of which in the Russian Navy has not yet been questioned. Recently, the third new-built frigate Admiral Golovko was armed with them. And at the raising of the ship's flag, the highest leaders of the state were present. Admiral Golovko became the third hypersonic frigate of the first rank of Project 223-50. There will be 10 of them in the next 5 years. And perhaps additional orders will follow. But, perhaps, the most unpleasant thing for our geopolitical rivals is that very soon Zircons will be baked like cakes according to Nikita Sergeyevich's precepts and put on our low-noise nuclear submarines. These are 7 Project 949A anti-class boats, 7 Project 971 Shuka B-class boats, and, of course, the most advanced and best of the best Yasin multi-purpose strike nuclear submarines. And that's not counting the diesel-electric ones, nicknamed Zaraza. Low noise, black holes. They can all launch calibers, which means they can take Zircons on board too. All of these boats, except perhaps the diesel-electric ones, have been off the coast of North America many times before, sometimes surfacing in full view of major cities for fun and as a reminder that the ocean is certainly a serious obstacle, but not an insurmountable one. Yasin M boats are a terrible headache for NATO strategists. They are physically untraceable. So, speaking of hypersonic, we can without any hurrah patriotism and false shame to state that about 8 years after the beginning of the main hypersonic race, which involved first the 3 most militarily powerful powers, and then joined them smaller countries, only Russia has a real hypersonic arsenal, including carriers directly product and even experience in its combat use. Hypersonic missiles, of course, are not a magic wand that will cause our enemies to instantly throw their hands up in the air and capitulate obediently. But it's awful. A very weighty goat if things go too far. A real weapon to deter any ambition. Once upon a time, back in Reagan's time, the Americans formulated the concept of prompt global strike, that is, an instant disarming blow. Now Russia, with its 3 main hypersonic weapons, has the capability to conduct such a strike and take the enemy by surprise, while the Americans still have big problems with it. Now let's move on to our frigates. We live in a remarkable time when seemingly exhausted military platforms are suddenly becoming relevant again, thanks to digitalization, new radars, missiles, and a mass of unmanned platforms. All of these innovations not only expand the capabilities of older units, but also allow some of them to completely change their combat specialization. A classic example is the MiG-31 fighter interceptor, which became one of the most formidable missile carriers in the world thanks to the hypersonic Kinzhal system. If we pay attention to the Navy, then here such a role begins to be played by the fast and extremely elegant ships of Project 1155, large anti-submarine MiGs. In their basic parameters they are very close to the main workhorse of the modern US Navy, the Arleigh Burke-type destroyers. Just like the American destroyers, they began to be developed in the 1970s. But unlike the ships, the American Navy, our BPC-155 had a fairly narrow specialization, reflected even in their name. The Soviets rightly feared the US's very powerful third-generation Los Angeles-class killer submarines carrying a huge arsenal of Tomahawk-type guided missiles. As a counter-move, a whole line of fast-moving BPC beauties was developed, one could say, for all occasions. They were born hunters of nuclear-powered attack submarines. But as a multi-purpose ship, like a frigate or destroyer, they noticeably lost to their American counterparts. The firstborn of the series had no strike missile armament at all. For such functions, the Soviet Union Navy had other combat units. Most of the BPC ships were inherited by Russia after the collapse of the Union. But the tasks and capabilities of the Russian Navy have changed considerably since then, and with a previous set of armament, more anti-submarine ships increasingly began to seem like a burden. It's scary to remember how many of these beauties were scrapped in the 90s. Here is a photo of the firstborn of the Series 1155M BPC, Udaloy, decommissioned and scrapped in 1996. Today the Russian Navy has 7 BPC 1155M and one more modernized version 1155.1. These are really big ships, almost 1.5 times larger than the Russian-made Project 22350 flagship strike ship Admiral Gorshkov. And at the same time, they are not so bulky and respond best to friction categorization. This is how they were conventionally designated even in the Soviet Union, where there were no frigates in service at all. This ship can carry hundreds of missiles of all kinds. In this metric, it approaches American and Chinese large minions with dozens of cell launchers capable of launching a whole pack of missiles at a time. Shaposhnikov, the first BPC, Marshall, multi-purpose frigate upgraded under the program, received a launcher from KSK-3S-14 for 16 supersonic cruise missiles. Onyx type, equally accurate against both sea and land targets. They have already proved that their strikes cannot be parried by the most advanced anti-missile systems of the United States and Europe. The universal launcher will also allow the use of calibers and, most importantly, the new hypersonic Zircons. In addition to the versatile Onyx, the new frigate will carry a launcher of the 3K-24 Uran anti-ship system with KH-35 missiles similar in basic data. American PKR Harpoon and Norwegian Haretrake missile. Such a set of strike capabilities will make it one of the heaviest armed ships in our fleet, second only to the nuclear-powered cruiser Admiral Nakhimov, the modernization of which is currently being completed at Sevmash. The second multi-purpose frigate based on the Project 155 BPK, Admiral Vinogradov, is scheduled to start sea trials in the near future. One of the modernization options provides for the installation of 32 cells for missiles caliber they will pop up and Zircon. The new multi-purpose frigates will be able to fight submarines no less effectively. Thanks to updated sonars, acoustic systems, anti-submarine helicopters, and SMERCH-2 and response anti-submarine warfare systems. The frigate, Marshal Shaposhnikov, has already met in conditions as close as possible to combat conditions with the American fourth-generation nuclear-powered attack submarine of the Virginia class. In February 1922, an American Navy submarine penetrated Russian territorial waters near the Kuril Ridge, where it was detected and captured by a Russian frigate. For an escort. As a result, Marshal Shaposhnikov used special means in the form of an imitation anti-submarine missile with a small amount of explosives, and the American nuclear submarine, having released a false target, urgently retreated into international waters. The ship is not badly protected from the air by the naval analog of missiles for Tora 2M and 6-barrel automatic artillery Alaska 630. In addition to anti-submarine helicopters, the air wing of such a frigate is made up of the Orlan drone, the Z-17 Ash and the Orion strike aircraft, which has solid combat experience. It is thought that the list of drones, given the rapid development of the area, is far from definitive. For sure. These frigates will accept both underwater drones and uncrewed boats as additional weapon systems. The benefit of such a huge platform allows for a lot. This photo shows a new missile deck replacing one of the AK-100 artillery installations on the Marshal Shaposhnikov frigate. Ships. During modernization, they are completely rebuilt and the result is a completely different unit. Retained in the best practices from the previous project. The modernization of the first ship of this type took a total of 4 years, and this period is promised to be reduced due to the proven technology. In comparison, the 223-50 frigate has a construction time of 8 to 10 years. So it's a very good solution for the fleet. 2 such frigates, Admiral Vinogradov and Admiral Chabanenko, are now in the process of modernization. And another one, BPC-155M, Admiral Pantalayev, is preparing to dock for these purposes, far from the shipyard. All of them will become hypersonic missile carriers, which changes them completely. Changes their status and role within the fleet. Excellent seagoing data and a large structural reserve will allow them to prolong their service for at least 1.5 decades. And our fleet without huge costs to get extremely scarce strike multi-purpose ships of the oceanic zone, not inferior in combat parameters to their main competitors.